Okay, we're continuing our sonnet series. We're going to talk about William Shakespeare sonnets today. He wrote over 154 sonnets in his lifetime, or the man that we think was Shakespeare, the man that it's attributed to. 154. And what's really interesting about this is they all follow the same form, which is kind of difficult to write in. So I went over that briefly in our sonnet kind of notes, but I want to kind of go over it again here at the beginning of um, this discussion on Shakespeare. So the English or the Shakespearean sonnet form, you have 14 lines. You have three 4-line quatrains followed by a rhyming couplet. And usually that setup is the couplet kind of changes everything. It's kind of like the first 12 lines are posing a question or a problem, and then the last two lines, the rhyming couplet at the end provides the solution or kind of changes everything in the poem. So interestingly enough, each line is written in iambic pentameter, which is basically means that you have 10 syllables per line. Every line has 10 syllables. And Shakespeare wrote everything in iambic pentameter. His plays, everything. And so you have 10 syllables per line. Each pair of syllables is called an iamb, which means that the first syllable is unstressed. The second syllable is stressed. So it's when in first I am disgrace is two, with four is three, tune and for men's eyes is five. So that's unstressed stress, unstressed stress, unstressed stress, unstressed stress, unstressed stress, all the way through. So what we have here for the rhyme scheme is A B, C D C D E F E F, and then your rhyming couplet at the end is G G. Okay, so let's read it and then we're going to discuss it. When in disgrace with fortune in men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate. Sorry, I was trying to chew a piece of gum and I decided that probably wasn't a good idea. Wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I in most enjoy contented least. Yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising from soul and earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. Our speaker begins in those first two quatrains, his first 8 lines, articulating his self pity and his depression at his outcast state. He is outcast. He is not like other men. He has no money. He's poor. He's in disgrace with fortune. Other men look down on him because he is not like them. And he sits around thinking about this quite a bit. Um, and he cries out to heaven, but his cries are bootless because, and they fall on deaf heaven's ears, which are not, heaven's not listening to his moaning and groaning and his pity party about himself. And so he curses himself. He curses his fate for being the way that he is. In lines 5 through 8, he lists the person that he would kind of the features that he would like to be. He wishes he was more rich. He wished he looked like this guy. He wished he had friends like this guy. He wished he had this man's art, his collections, his skill, or his ability, and that man's scope, his knowledge. He wishes that, in short, that he was richer, better looking, popular, more cultured, and smarter, all the way around. But he's not. And so that is kind of where this poem kind of takes a change right there in lines 9 through 14. He says, "Yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, just when I'm despising him, he's despising himself for being less than. What does he do? Well, he thinks about his love. He says, Happily, I think on thee. And that love changes everything, right? That influence that he or she has over his life. It helps him see his situation more clearly. And he says, "Yeah, I don't have all of these things, but I have you and I have your love." And so he says, like to the lark at break of day arising, it's singing to heaven as it flies along. His love gives him all the wealth that he could ever need. And so he wouldn't even trade it there. He says, "I scorn to change my state with kings." He wouldn't even trade it for the lives of kings. Let's take a look at 130, which is our second one. Interesting, this one. So just a little bit of background information. I won't go back into the whole iambic pentameter thing again. Just know that they're all written in iambic pentameter. They all have the same rhyme scheme, that A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. So the standard of beauty during this time was very, very interesting. So women were expected to have flawless white skin. Um, and red lips and red cheeks and fair hair, and that's the kind of the standard of beauty that the women subscribe to. Interestingly enough, they went to great lengths to achieve these standards of beauty, even risk death for them. So women at the time period would wear a mix of white lead or vinegar, arsenic, hydroxide, and carbonate, which they would mix with egg whites. And that would be their foundation primer. On top of that, they would layer on some mercury based foundation and some arsenic face powder. And they would definitely achieve that white, that silvery, gleaming complexion that they wanted, but they also suffered a lot from heavy metal poisoning, which would cause paralysis, madness, death, So, that what is the saying about, beauty, whatever hurts, that kind of whatever that is. It definitely, I can't remember it. Beauty is pain. Thank you. I had a student in here that helped me out. Beauty is pain. So they went to all those great lengths and risked death so that they could be beautiful. And they would suffer the consequences from it. If they didn't have paralysis, madness, or death, their skin would begin to eat away from lead poisoning, and they would have giant patches of skin missing. It was very attractive then, I'm sure. So, that standard of beauty, what we have here, it seems to be that Shakespeare is saying that his girl is not like those women. He says, "My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hair be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damask red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground." We'll talk about those first 12 lines first, and then we'll talk about those last couplets um, in just a second. So let's talk about this. So we talked about that standard of beauty. So those three quatrains that make up the body of the poem, those 12 lines, his mistress is not like those women, right? Her eyes are nothing like the sun. Her lips are coral. Her skin isn't fair white. Her hair is black. Black wires grow on her head. She doesn't have rosy cheeks. Her breath stinks. Her voice isn't as pleasing as music. And when we first read that, we kind of get the vibe that he's a little disappointed that she isn't like those other goddesses that float around. She is just your average, ordinary, everyday woman who treads on the ground. And so we think that, he is talking about that, but what he's really trying to do here, I think, is being critical of that standard of beauty that was so popular at the time period. He is It changes there in that last little couplet. So that closing couplet says, "And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she belied with faults compares." That couplet changes everything. He's not disappointed at all. In fact, he finds her rare. because she isn't like every other woman. And to him, there's no comparison, right? She checks all the boxes in his book.